This is the best Star Wars show that we have ever gotten. Star Wars Skeleton Crew has finished its run at 8 episodes, and it stuck the landing. The finale of Skeleton Crew, The Real Good Guys, showed us all that this is a standalone series inside its own little bubble, and I love that. The last episode of the series took everything that we've seen from the previous 7 episodes, tied it up into a nice bow, and gave it to us on a silver platter. This was a near perfect ending to an amazing show. I'm going to do my breakdown here for the finale a little bit different. I'm not going to rehash every aspect of the episode. You guys watched it. You know what happened. But I'm going to give you my insights and my thoughts into what we saw at various points along the way. We got the last couple of answers that we've been waiting for this whole time. We got some nice themes woven into this episode. And they took things that happened from the past 7 episodes and brought them together to create the finale. And the best part, it did not end on a cliffhanger. So, what questions did we get answers to? Well, we finally learned who or what the supervisor is. And I hate to say I told you so, but I hit this one right on the head because it was indeed a droid. The other big question we've been left with up until this point, who is Jod? Or should I say, who was Jod? And while it was a short little explanation, we did get Jod's backstory. And it turns out that Jod was never a Padawan. He was never a Jedi. In the time period after Order 66, he was found by a Jedi who had survived, who took him in and started to teach him the ways of the Force. However, at some point, either the stormtroopers or the Inquisitors found his master, took her out, and actually made him watch. They were very clear in the point that saying Jod's teacher was a female Jedi. So that begs the question, who was it? If we're going based on only what we've seen in canon on who has survived, tell me if I'm wrong, but the only female Jedi that we know that survived is Sierra from the Fallen Jedi Order storyline. However, we don't see her story end in the way that Jod describes, so there must be another female Jedi out there who survived Order 66. And the final question that we got answered, is Jod going to be this reluctant hero, this Han Solo type figure? Well, the answer is no. Jod was the villain of this story, and the story ended with Jod as the villain. And you know what? I liked that. I didn't need another bad guy turned good redemption story in Star Wars. I liked that we had a guy that we all hoped was going to be good end up being bad in the end. I thoroughly enjoyed that. However, there is something about Jod's character that just didn't make sense to me in this finale, and this is why I said the finale was nearly perfect. All along, Jod wanted the treasure. He wanted the credits. So why did he all of a sudden decide that he also wants to rule a planet? I found that to be out of character and not something that we had seen from him before. I think it would have been much more in Jod's character to load up their ships with credits and leave and spend them all the rest of their lives. Now, as in every episode of Skeleton Crew, this show really likes to make some nods to the 80s movies that I grew up with. And this episode was no different. When we finally meet the supervisor and we find out that it is a droid, does that droid look somewhat familiar to you? Because if you ask me, they took a lot of inspiration from Hal from the 2001 A Space Odyssey movie. And the other little nod to a movie from the 80s that I caught was once again a Goonies reference. When the kids realize that their speeders still work and they take off to go help Fern, Wim's dad takes a speeder from another kid to help them out. And when I saw that scene, I immediately thought of this scene from the Goonies when Bran steals a little kid's bike to go after the kids. When it came to the way this episode marked its path along the story, it did an amazing job of calling back to past episodes, showing us what these kids learned and how they were able to take what they learned on this incredible journey and use it to defeat Jod and the pirates. KB learned to trust Kim from the little interaction she had, and her first idea was to escape and find Kim to send the X-Wings to help. She also took the training that she learned how to fly the Onyx Cinder, and she was able to fly to safety without the help of Jod. We see Fern, who has learned how to be a leader to the other kids, step up and lead in this fight against Jod at the end, and ultimately was able to use her leadership to convince her mom of what needed to be done to save the day. Neil found on another version of At-Aten that there were turbo lasers on top of the building, and he remembered this and how to use it, and was able to use that turbo laser to let the Onyx Cinder escape the planet. And Wim, who had the toughest time throughout this whole show finding who he is, was finally able to stand up for himself, to tell his dad what he needed to do, to stand up to Jod, and use that confidence that he had been slowly trying to find throughout the entire series to have his hero moment in the end. And then the overarching theme I saw in this episode was really about parents learning to trust their kids and let their kids grow up and grow. At the beginning of the episode, none of the parents wanted to listen to what the kids had to say, even though the kids were the ones who had all the information. But by the end of the episode, Wim's dad, Fern's mom, they listened to the kids and let the kids guide them and help them save At-Aten. This episode, to me, felt more Star Wars than any episode we've gotten. They gave us Star Wars. The speeder chase was Star Wars. The X-Wings and the B-Wings were Star Wars. This episode was full-blown Star Wars, and I loved it. And speaking of the B-Wings, did you notice that we finally got to see on our screens the quad lasers of the B-Wing in action? How amazing was that? So Skeleton Crew is over now. They did not leave it open-ended. They ended their story. This story was a standalone story within the Star Wars universe. They didn't bring in those unnecessary connections to what's going on around them because they didn't have to. This was a great singular story told within the Star Wars universe. And if you ask me, we need a lot more of this as we move forward with more Star Wars projects. Now, that's not to say that I don't want to see these kids again or that we won't see these kids again, because odds are we will somewhere down the road. But for now, their story is ended. We don't need a season 2. We already got an amazing series called Star Wars Skeleton Crew.